Hey Zach, Zach's with me today in Marathon Money Podcast, and this is your host Kenny Coins. Zach, man, how's everything going?
Good, good. Everything is very calm and enjoying the weekend. How are you? Thanks
Good,
for having me on.
man. I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you
Thank you.
coming on. I did take a look at some of the stuff you did in the past. What caught my eye was like mergers and acquisitions. I
Yeah,
think the world is like pretty much PE based now.
yeah,
What do
yeah,
you say? Everything is PE now. Everybody's trying to buy companies that's already been built. You got the retirees who used to have businesses and they're just buying a lot of PE firms just buying it up.
yeah.
So tell me your opinion on that, man. Like what's your experience with all that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think at a high level, there's been a record amount of dry powder with these private equity funds, firms. And ultimately that dry powder needs to get deployed. So there has been a lot of appetite for acquisitions, really across the board, even from brick and mortar type style businesses, you know, the the or mergers of medical practices, labs, but then even into, and then I think more predominantly technology than anything else. And like you alluded to, there's a record amount of people kind of looking to retire, but then there's also a large influx of more and more individuals going down the path of entrepreneurship, building successful tech companies, and then they're still young. Maybe they want to take some chips off the table, diversify their portfolio, and they want to sell a chunk of their business. And that's really where we come in. I think while maybe the last, let's call it a year or so, there wasn't as much activity, especially when it came to like large cap mergers and acquisitions, investment banking. You had a decline in new IPOs, for example, but that was, I think, really a function of the rising interest rate. Interest rates go up, the cost of capital goes up, and then as a result, financing any kind of transaction becomes more expensive. But now, it seemingly appears that we're going to enter another rate cutting cycle. So we're very bullish on Q4 of 24 as well as Q1 of 25. We think there's going to be a lot of deal activity. Our pipeline is quite full right now, and we're very excited and bullish for what the next, let's call it, 6 months, 6 to 9 months, have in store for us.
Man, it seemed like we could touch on the topic of the rate cuts.
Yeah,
I interviewed somebody like the other day. We sat down and he brought up the rate cuts, and he was saying that it could go either way. It could be really bad and lead us down to a depression, or, the market could boom. Um, I'm in. I'm on my when I'm not doing this. I actually am part of a private equity company for securities and technologies.
very nice.
We have about over maybe like 20,000 employees between all the companies we have collected put together. And one thing we're noticing, people want their money back. with,
Very nice. Yeah,
with That's one of the things you notice. A lot of investors are starting to ask for their money back. They're starting to ask for them to get paid their money back pretty a lot faster.
mm.
And with that happening, how do you feel the private equity space is not in a bubble right now because of that? Because now I feel like there's so much private equity companies and there's so many unique industries private equity companies are stepping in. I feel like now there's like a bubble in the private equity space.
That's a good question. And you bring up a really good point. Ultimately, whether a rate hike, and this kind of goes into the question of bubbles, whether a rate hike is ultimately a good thing for us in the long run or a bad thing, it's tough to say. We there's a lot of macroeconomic factors out there that lead us to believe we're not in a path, we're not going down a path that is 100% sustainable. You know, there's a potential for even the US dollar to not become the reserve currency anymore. Uh, there's a potential for a devaluation of the dollar. And so I think that even though, these issues are on the horizon, at least in the short term, there is still opportunity, to make money, whether you're gonna acquire a business or whether you're in the position where you're gonna facilitate a transaction. Um, and and that um, I think that's something that is just worth focusing on, worth mentioning, more than anything. If do I think there's a bubble in private equity as a whole? I think valuations have the potential to get a little lofty, but I also think there's a lot of inventory out there.
100%, hundred
Yeah,
percent.
exactly,
Valuations
exactly,
do, and Nvidia is a prime example of a very extreme lofty over evaluation. A lot of people tends to, you know, the first sign of bad is almost the end of the world for most
exactly.
people.
Yeah, for most people, exactly, exactly. And there's a lot of that happening, and we can, I think, if you look at, what was it? I don't know if it was BlackRock or Blackstone. They recently bought Preqin. That traded at a revenue multiple. It was a large revenue multiple, and there's definitely a case to be made that you're experiencing some bubble-like environment. On the flip side of that coin, there's still a lot of inventory when it comes to acquisition appetite. Well, rather, an appetite to sell your business, to take chips off the table. So there is a supply and demand question here. Um, and if I think if there was going to, it's tough to say whether or not the market can correct like that. Obviously, there's some peaks and troughs. We just came out of 6 months of really not having any deal activity, especially on the large cap investment banking side. But um, it's going to be interesting to see how it ultimately plays out. Definitely.
One thing I do want to say that what you said I brought to mind was the fact that, like, I want to go back to, like, you speak about there's more entrepreneurs, there's more people taking a chance, and that also changes the psychology of the state of the world, and how people view money and how people view the economy. And now you had a generation before that really didn't take much risk. Generation before us didn't really take much risk. They probably, they probably took a risk of buying maybe another property, but less than that, most of the risk they took was buying another property. Now you got a generation where people are stepping out. They're trying to be entrepreneurs. They're trying to do more. They're realizing their regular jobs are not going to be enough in the long run. There's,
Hmm.
you got Social Security that anybody in between the age of, like, under 40 is not going to see, more likely not going to see their Social Security. And so with that type of mindset, you have P firms kind of running the world right now. You got entrepreneurs out of the woodwork, make it or not make it. Um, People don't really want to work regular jobs. Um, there's just a different, the economy, the state of the world and economy in the state of the United States kind of like upside down now.
Hmm.
It used to be workers at the top. Now it's entrepreneurs at the top, and more people are more focused on being entrepreneurs than they're more focused on having a 9 to 5 job and having a stable career. Because entrepreneurship, even running a PE firm, is extremely risky.
Yeah.
When you say, like, even working for a PE firm is extremely risky,
Yeah.
and the tides can turn on you at any moment. And
100%.
all it's take is a few investors saying, "I want my money back."
Yeah. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think it's on in some ways it's a product of the era we're living in. it's never been more easier to start a business than right now. We have the gift of the internet. There's AI now, no code apps. Like, it's become almost so seamless, with the advent of things like, Upwork and other similar services. You can connect to a labor force now that is across the world, and leverage labor arbitrage, something that's was never really available to your everyday individual. So I think there's an element of that at play. But then in on top of that, the economy, I think, the economy, the what a 9 to 5 job, let's call it, provides you now, that value proposition is significantly decreasing. And so it's become a little bit more different. I think when you talk about, individuals that need to, pay off their debt, individuals that want to get a mortgage, there's a car loan, very quickly comes to realize that the wages are not keeping up. At least wages from your traditional W-2 income are not keeping up. And so people are indeed looking for other avenues to make money, to create something sustainable for themselves, for their families, their future generations. And especially in America, where we embody that individualism, that capitalistic spirit. And so I think that's a main driver as to why we're seeing more and more younger individuals take that leap, right now than at any time at all. Um, how something like that can be rectified. It's tough to say. But that unfortunately and fortunately, depending on how you look at it, is is the environment that particularly individuals in our generation are now having to navigate.
I think what you said is like 100% accurate. We're living in a state of world where even the regular professions that everybody go to college for, that your parents want you to be, doctors, engineers, lawyers, scientists, that usually make between 90 to like up to like 350K later on in your career, it started slowly not be enough because you can't even get off the ground.
Yeah.
And when you can't get off the ground, you can never make it to those heights. And that's starting to be an issue when you start your career with 200, 300K in debt and it's a 30-year payoff. There's just, it doesn't matter if you make 150K a year, you can't even get a place to live.
Yeah.
And now you have a generation that is forced to either work 2 jobs or work a job and start a business on the side, and then eventually defocus from their current job to make this business work, because in reality you're looking at the company you're in, and this ties back to PE firms. At certain points when you're working for a PE firm and they buy a company, their goal is to take as much money as they can out of that company and break it up in pieces and sell it.
Hmm.
That's literally the goal.
Yeah.
And as individual people, as employees, you have to look at that and say, and you have to go out and learn. You have to go out and learn. It's somebody, a P firm just bought your company. What do? You got to go out and learn. You got to go out and find out. You got to go out and research. And I think a lot of people need to start doing that.
Hmm.
Definitely when that happens to you. And we're getting to a state of the world where people are making the choices to say, okay, I need to start something. I need, even if it's making me an extra $1,000 a month that I can put away and have $12,000 at the end of the year to have in my bank account. It's better than what's the averages. The averages is $2,700 in savings. And I think
100%.
a, a lot of people is going to come to a realization that if I don't do something now, if I don't take a bite of the apple now, there won't be an apple to get bitten up. There
Yeah.
won't be an apple at all. And there's so many people coming out becoming entrepreneurs. There's so many people are getting out of the workforce that can't get back in, and people are getting laid off.
Hmm.
Every month you're hearing a large company laid off, and AI is a big one of the big components of it.
Yeah, could be a game changer from an employment standpoint.
It could
And
be.
even in financial services, it's so cyclical. I mean, well, I'll be honest with you. When I first decided to go into financial services, I didn't realize it actually gets this cyclical. You have a small downturn, and a bank will slash, its workforce like it's nobody's business. And if you're working for like a boutique operation, some kind of like what I'm in right now, that can lead to a 20 to 25% reduction in workforce. And you may be a very good employee, but you may just not make that cut. It's an unfortunate product of circumstance. And so I think now more than ever, every individual has to be has to keep abreast of the dynamics that we're living in. And especially with the rising cost of housing, from rents to mortgages, real estate in the suburbs is still very high. Interest rates make getting a loan even more expensive. And there needs to be some element of diversification at the end of the day, or you'll be the individual they end up taking advantage of, unfortunately.
Completely agree. You'll definitely be the individual they take advantage of, and people get blindsided every day. People think they're going to work, show up to work. They've been doing it for 5 years, no problem. They got a raise 2 weeks ago. Show up to work, and then they're getting laid off. It happens quite as often as people don't. They don't realize this happens almost every day to somebody,
Yeah.
and I think we're in a era where this is going to be truly a company. It's already a corporation country. It's truly going to be a corporation country.
Mm,
And it's going to come down to who can leverage themselves and who can basically present themselves well that holds their position. I think we're going to enter a era where these certain type of skills is going to matter. Who can sell themselves well? Who can sell a certain product? Who can convince large investors to buy this company, and who has these? They're going to be a set of skills that's all it's going to matter, because most of the hard labor is going to be done,
yeah.
and we're going to have AI for it, and that might be in 20 years, but they're gearing up for it now.
Hmm.
They're trying to speed it along now. um there was this guy I met a while back. He said, if you don't prepare for the future would definitely not prepare for you.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, yo, and it's kind of mind blowing when he said it. He said, like, if you don't pay attention, you're not going to be a part of the future. You're just going to be a bystander. And when you're a bystander, you get easily knocked off.
Easily, yeah. And it'll happen quickly, and it'll happen right before your eyes, and you won't even realize until it's too late, and then there's nothing to do about it.
Have you ever read The Psychology of Money?
No, I haven't. I haven't
Okay,
actually.
in the Psychology of Money, there's this segment where in the beginning of the book it talks about different eras of how people view money. And I think this, and basically in the 1920s during the Great Depression, how they view money is going to be different from the people that view money from 1940s and 1960s. And during Great Depression, all they know how to do is save.
Hmm.
They had no opportunities. The stock market was flat. Everything was all wrong in the Great Depression. Now you get to the between the 1940s and 1960s, where the world is kind of rising, the end of the war. America is now fully the reserve currency. Um, Innovation has all-time high. Railroads, planes, uh technology, computers are popping up everywhere, and more women are working, and more opportunity are starting to present itself at an
Hmm.
all-time high.
Hmm.
So people view money differently in that era, that era of opportunity. And my point is, I'm trying to say is that the view of money is the same thing, a view of opportunity. And if we do what the Great Depression does when things get bad, like the pandemic, and just say like, oh, there's no opportunities out there. There's no opportunities for the regular individual. Um, you're gonna be right regardless. we're in a period where there is so much opportunity right now, and there might not be in the next 10 years. And you got an
Yeah.
opportunity to take a chance right now. So if you got an extra 10, 20 grand, 30 grand that you can take a chance on yourself and say, I'm gonna take a chance on this. I'm gonna start right now and not wait till the perfect conditions. I'm gonna start right now. I would advise so, because the world is going to change, and when it does
Absolutely.
change, you might not have the same leverage, or the cost of entry is going to be 10 times higher. And the
Mm.
housing market's a great example of that. If you bought a house in 2019, you bought it at a 2% interest rate,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
80% lower. So the cost of entry, literally a year, 2 years prior, or 3 years prior, or even in 2021, the cost of entry was so low. The cost of entry now is almost unbearable. You
Almost. Yeah.
buy a
Absolutely.
you buy a house now, you're going to be in you're probably going to be underwater.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And I think a good segue into this is like also when came to like real estate investing. I think a lot of the consensus, at least for the last 10 years or so, has been, oh, most millionaires are made through real estate. I want to get into real estate investing. I think any professional kind of thinks about this if they start, earning some disposable income. And but now though, it's like the cost of actually getting into something like that has in a sustainable fashion that, puts you in a high likelihood position of success, the cost has become so insurmountable that I especially when considering the return, on that time and investment of resources, that I think a lot of people are sitting there kind of scratching their heads as to, what can I do? Like what can I do to ultimately get ahead? And it's a little bit, I think I definitely, like, let's call it 30 years ago, 50 years ago, it was a lot easier if you just came with a mindset of getting ahead for you to come up with a way to get ahead in life. But now it just sounds like the your number of options have declined, and but
Significantly.
significantly. With that said, though,
Significantly.
it's still easier than ever to start a business, but you have to kind of be very precise about it now, and that's something that wasn't really, it was a little bit different, back then.
And like on the topic how easy it is to start a business is, nowadays where there's a lot of like businesses that are not really businesses. They're more like gimmicks.
Yeah.
They're not really like a business. They're more like a gimmick, and then you get into it, you might make money, but you ain't gonna make money long.
Mm,
Um I always say this when I look at a company. I said, like, what's his longevity? What's his moat? You know what I mean? The wider the
yeah.
moat, the stickier the moat is, the chances that it's gonna last a long time. And we're in an era where there's not a lot of business that have sticky moats. There's not very much business that have wide moats anymore.
Yeah.
Those are starting to become far and few between. Um, a lot of businesses are helmed on one individual. If that one individual goes away, the business goes away.
Hmm.
Um, there's not a lot of like where you get into an engineering firm, and um the engineering firm maybe 30 years ago used to be great, but there's no like younger people coming in that's in the same field learning the same thing to keep that engineering firm afloat,
Yeah.
and so on and so on. And I think that's starting to become a problem. Just look at US Steel, look at any oil refinery, or any, you know like construction companies. There's just not a lot of young people coming in, and then the
Yeah.
cost of entry to actually start your own construction companies, it's even more expensive now. The
Yeah.
materials cost a lot more, the labor cost a lot more. um even the financing to even the financing,
Yeah.
if you wanted to buy a company, the financing, the
Yeah.
money that you need to borrow cost a lot more.
Yeah.
um it's just, at the end of the day, you're right. it's easier to start a business, but the opportunities out there to have a business that's going to be generational is a lot harder.
Oh yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. Quite I'll give you like a good kind of example of this. So, we deal in like tech M&A. So sometimes we're selling application developers. Sometimes we're selling a business that has some kind of software that allows it to, make money at scale. Other times, particularly on the software side, you'll get uh you'll get in contact with a potential client who thinks that because they have a software that does something, um, that warrants, of a high valuation, call it 10 plus EBITDA, 3, 4, 5 times revenue, whatever the case may be, something lofty. Meanwhile, though, the software in and of itself doesn't actually do anything special. It may be a proprietary product to you in that you help develop this software, but really another team of developers could develop a very similar software and not really infringe upon your IP. It's essentially, it serves a purpose, but it's nothing revolutionary at the end of the day, especially from a tech standpoint.
Man, it's
And
such an accurate statement.
yeah,
Such an accurate statement. It's the delusion that we have in the state we're in. It's actually a delusion because people don't realize how. First of all, number one, it's hard to create something that nobody else can do. That's number one.
yeah,
That's what makes stuff sticky. When you can create something nobody else can do, and then after that, be able to patent it in time and get the IP and all that stuff, and be able to say, okay, this is mine. Nobody can. Everybody has to license it through me. You know what I mean?
100%. Yeah.
It's very difficult to do, and we get this sense of I was like, no, no, it is I patented it. I know it's going to be great. Yeah, but the market doesn't say that. When we put it
Mhm.
out in the market, you say it's worth 20 million, but really it's only worth two
Mhm. Yeah.
because the
Exactly.
market tells us that this is not, this is like every other product. There's nothing really special about it.
Yep.
You
Yep.
probably market it more special, and which it probably valuate $2 million more than the other competitors, but it's not worth 20. And
Exactly.
we're running, that is something we're running into a lot.
A
We're
lot.
running
Yeah.
a lot, and it's becoming, that's why you go in periods without buying anything. And you see it in the stock market. A lot of companies are overvalued in the stock market, and then that's how a lot of people lose their money. You see it, you kind of see it everywhere. You kind of see um just overvaluation in almost every product, and there's so many companies doing the same thing. Timu and Shein is like a prime a prime
Yeah.
example. It's like it's it's like a Shein comes out, try to compete with like Fashion Nova, then Timu comes out, and now they're cheaper, and then everybody's trying to, now everybody pretty much looks like Amazon now because they sell
Yeah.
everything,
Yeah.
and you're like, okay, here it goes. We're just waiting for one of them to start doing like Prime videos.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's and while we're on that, then like look at streaming, look at Netflix, Hulu.
Mhm.
Like how many streaming services are out there now?
Agreed. And to, piggyback off that, it's really funny because I feel like everyone started getting into streaming because of the fact that there were no ads, and now everyone's just put ads back into it because it just wasn't like a sustainable model. It's like it's almost like the same thing as like television again. Like it's a bit of a circle of life kind of thing or something. It's just it from just a psychological standpoint, I think it's really comical. And it's a
And
fifty
it
billion
goes
dollar
back to
company,
the
whatever.
statement. It goes back to the statement you said. There's nothing revolutionary.
Yeah.
Streaming service itself was revolutionary, but the way to make money streaming was always going to be ads.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, like, yeah, we made watching TV better. We did. We made watching TV better. We told you that we're gonna take away commercials, made watching TV. We're gonna do a membership, but people are finicky. People cancel their memberships all the time. Then people
Hmm.
move on. They go to different places. And it's, let's say if you have 100 members, you only have 20% that are loyal.
Yeah.
Most of them are the 80% is coming back and forth,
Yep.
and signing up for the free and getting off before the free's over. Um, but TV is a prime example of streaming was always gonna go back to TV with ads.
Mm.
It was always gonna go back to that. It just took 15 years. That's it. And
Wow.
I
Yeah.
think, and it goes back to me saying the sticky moat. We have a lot of businesses out here that doesn't have the sticky moat, and the reality is we're trying to recreate the wheel when we should just be improving it. And
Mm.
streaming try to recreate a wheel where they should have
Yeah.
just improved upon it and said, look, ads are the only way to make money, and kept it like that. But now everything at you from YouTube,
Yeah.
you can't even read an article when I have to wait 15 seconds now. It's like they made it the norm. It's the norm now. And it's sad. I think we're getting to the point of society where everything is almost the same.
Mm.
Everything is almost,
Yeah.
there's no major difference anymore. I think I don't, if you would agree with me, I think the last revolutionary product was probably the iPhone. Um,
Wow. Yeah.
in my opinion, like the real true last revolutionary product is probably the iPhone. I can't think
Yeah.
of anything between 2007 and now that was revolutionary.
Yeah. That's that's a really good point, man. Like
Yeah,
I can't. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can't. And if you
Yeah.
if you look at the 50s and from the 1950s all the way to like 2002, you probably can think of like 50 products that we currently use today. That was the computer, I mean, the cell phone, kitchen
Microwave. You know.
microwave, kitchen appliances, like so much things were done in that era, but starting a business was so much harder to get into. Like now
Yeah.
it's so easy to get a business. Back then it was so much harder to get a business, but there was a plethora of opportunities. But getting a
Wow.
business was hard, but the opportunities were high. Now your
Mm.
business are easy and the opportunities are low.
I hear you on that. It makes a lot of sense. So, but my question though is, when it comes from understand, like, this is kind of the landscape that we're in right now. But at the end of the day, there are businesses, whether they're in the tech space or outside, they may not really be sticky. They may not have a moat per se, as we're talking about right now in the scope of this discussion. But they may be doing 5 million, 10 million EBITDA, and they're completely, they've been around for 7 years. You can LBO that. You'd probably be able to make some money from it. Does that mean that like investing or acquiring something like that, in your opinion, is that unwise, or maybe not necessarily? I'm just
Well,
curious.
I would say it's a lot more risky because one thing you're going to be always worrying about being replicated.
It's a good point.
Because when you think about a wide moat and a sticky moat, the thing about it is you can't be replicated or you can't be taken over. You know what I mean? Somebody can't come in your space and easily take you.
Yeah.
Um, that's unless you were first. See,
Okay.
Amazon was first. That's the
Mm.
thing about Amazon. That's what make Amazon ran the space for 20 something years before other people started getting into the space. So they got like 80% of the market share. Because
Yeah.
I remember Xerox had that. They had actually Xerox had 99% of the market share.
Yeah.
Now they barely have 20. But
Yeah.
like it, but Xerox can be easily replicated. Is that going to happen to Amazon? We don't know.
Mm.
They definitely happened to Netflix. Netflix
Yeah.
for at least 5 years had completely cornered the market in
Completely.
streaming services.
Yeah.
Now there's over almost 25 streaming services, almost 30. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
And is that going to happen? Right now, Tesla corners the market in electric cars. As we know from the past, as more Ford was kind of one of the first cars, and eventually over time, after 50 years, 60 years, Ford market share decreased. Ford barely has market share now,
mm, yeah,
and that's I think the question you asked, those type of companies besides Tesla, Amazon, Netflix, Ford, Car, like they'll all fall on it because there's no sticky mode. There's
yeah,
no sticky mode anymore. The what made Ford special because it was a number one and the only people that can make cars right
mm,
now. Now, but the mode's
yeah,
not there. There's not sticky. The Amazon was the only large shopping place. That's you got Temu, Shein, you got Walmart,
Alibaba, yeah,
Alibaba, Walmart's in the game. You got so many companies doing the same thing now. It's like, yes, Amazon is still the biggest market share. Yes, they're the most bought packages. You see them everywhere, but
mhm,
you can tell that's not going to last long. You can tell that right
wow,
now. That's probably not going to last long. Give it another 10 years, you'll start seeing the Amazon market share start to shrink.
makes a lot of sense. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
No, I c
and
yeah,
that's like to answer your question that it all it comes down to how can you be easily replicated? And then if you can, how long do you have before you're replicated?
mm,
Because
and always
it's just like a roller coaster. Once you get to the top, how long does it take you to start to plateau?
yeah, yeah, exactly, and, it's quite interesting you bring this up, because, you know, something like a Netflix or even potentially an Amazon, you're always keeping tabs on the competition, and so you have to be cognizant of, how am I going to get replaced? How are they coming after me? These are the thoughts that are, going in the minds of, boards or whomever. But if you do have something truly revolutionary, let's say like an iPhone, the conversation really becomes about how do we innovate this further? How do we iterate? It's more of an expansionist mindset versus a scarcity mindset, if anything. And it's completely different. And obviously, one is
We
more sustainable than the other.
we went from an innovation country to a scarcity. It's like, all right, I just got to keep the competition away long enough.
Yeah.
And I think, and I blame this on Mark Zuckerberg a little bit. And I know people think this funny, but um, Mark was like, I can't beat Instagram. I'll just buy them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And for a little bit, and then Snapchat had this thing going, and Mark
Mm,
wanted to buy Snapchat. Snapchat said no. They just copied everything they did. That's how we end up with stories.
yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah. 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 I remember that.
A lot of people don't know. Mark tried to buy Snapchat, and then just end up. He was like, they said no, and it was like, all right, cool. We'll just take your stories then. And now for Instagram and now Twitter, TikTok has stories, and
Yeah.
Twitter has stories. They just took
Mhm.
it. You know what I mean? It's just like that's what it is. Either we buy you or we take your product
Yeah.
and replicate it. And then Snapchat is still one of the lowest performing social apps.
Yeah.
Is now if it was 20 years prior, they would have stood a lot tall. They would have the stories would have worked out for them. The way everything's presented now would have worked out. The reels would have made money.
Yeah.
Um, what and the reason why TikTok is the biggest one of the biggest social platform and it climbed up really fast because it's the algorithm behind it.
Mm.
Nobody can figure out how they're doing it.
Yeah.
And that's really what it comes down to when you talk about software. It's you got to almost have something that nobody can figure out.
Exactly, exactly, like Google with,
You
search. Yeah,
search. You have to have something nobody can figure it out, and that has a time frame on it.
yeah,
That too has a time frame on it because one day somebody will figure it out, and then somebody when they do figure it out, then somebody else is going to figure it out. It's the same thing with the 4 minute mile. Once one person did it, by the end of the year, 100 people has done it.
mhm, yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's once TikTok gets figured out, it's going to be a matter of time where you're going to have a plethora of 50 companies that now can do this.
Wow. And throughout all of this, there's almost no one kind of thinking, what's next? How do we take society one step further, one step farther? And don't really have any of those personalities. I think like if anything, Elon Musk,
No.
maybe, but he kind of wants to take us to Mars.
Yeah,
But
he's
you know,
somewhere else.
yeah.
Yeah, he's somewhere else. He's thinking about just getting off this planet.
Yeah.
Um, but no, you're right, man. Nobody's thinking about what's next. Nobody's thinking about where we can be innovative at. What needs to be fixed. Um, we're reached a point of error because of the economy. We reached a point of error. Everybody's just saying, "Man, I'm just trying to survive."
Yeah. Wow.
And once you get into that I'm just trying to survive mode, nobody's thinking about being innovative. Nobody's thinking about doing more. No, no, that's not happening. It's
Yeah.
like everybody's just saying, "Man, dude, I just got to survive. I just got to make it until next week." And then when you get into that era, that's when innovation is gone. You know what I mean? We're like we only have like 5 minutes left, but like just think about student loans. It's like
Mm.
most kids at school is just like, man, if I take this one class, man, it might add like $20,000 to my student loan, which I have to pay back 50.
Yeah.
And it's just like you're like, you know what, it's not worth it. You know what I mean? And then
Yeah.
that right there, when you're worried about that, and you're worried about all the bills you're gonna have, and you're worried about that, nobody's thinking about being innovative. Everybody's just thinking about, I just need to get through.
Wow. I think you've hit the nail on the head, and I must say, I think you're very very perceptive as to what's happening, what's going on, even when it comes to the micro level, but also the macro level. And I hope more people can hear you out and
Man,
take some value from you.
man, I appreciate you coming on the show, man. I
No
appreciate you
problem.
coming on Marathon Money. I appreciate you being one of our interviews. I don't know. I think I when I messaged you, I told you like we're coming up on 10 years. Um we've been doing this quite a bit. I have a
Yeah.
partner, his name is Cam. But man, I do appreciate it a lot, man.
Amazing, amazing. Well, congrats on all your success, man. It's really great what you're doing out here.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it.